Hi, welcome to the Shacketon Building, Building 44, the home of geography here at the University of Southampton. My name's Dr. Jo Nield. I'm an aeolian geomorphologist, which means I do a lot of work in desert landscapes. And today I'd like to take you on a short tour of our building to show you some of the facilities that will be available for you if you choose to come and study geography here at Southampton. Here we are in Lecture Theatre A, one of the lecture theatres within the Shacketon Geography Building, where you might find yourself in the first year, for example, studying desert landscapes with myself or coastal landscapes with Eli Lazarus. It's a lecture theatre that in normal times holds about 120 students. In COVID times we held about 20 students in here. And it's really a chance for you to interact with lecturers, with academic staff, and learn more about different things, different processes within geography. So students that come to study geography at Southampton, when you start here at geography, you start on a BSc or a BA program, but the two in the first year are the same. Everyone gets the opportunity to go into the teaching labs, for example, which I'll show you in a moment. Everyone gets the chance to sit in a lecture theatre and discuss geography with academic staff. So you start off in year one having a number of skills and topics that you cover that are related to human geography, physical geography, and common across both geographies. You'll then move into the second and third year, which is where you start to more specialise. And it's those cases where you'll get to use again the teaching labs if you're doing a BSc, for example, or you could choose an optional module still in the BA programme. Here in our dedicated teaching laboratory, you'll have the chance to put theory into practice. So some of the concepts you will have learnt through our core modules on environmental change, you'll get to experience firsthand by using our microscopes, by using other scientific equipment as part of group teaching. So for example, when you have a lake and that lake collects sediment, over time sediment builds up in layers. And if you go and collect some sediment from that lake, you can say something about the conditions, the environmental conditions that built up on each of those layers of sediment within the lake. You can use our microscopes to look at some of that sediment and identify the microorganisms that were once present during the environmental conditions that were contributing to that sediment layer. This then moves on to modules in the second year that are optional. For example, in quaternary environmental change, you look at how the UK and the world has changed over thousands of years. You look at what the climate patterns were doing in the past, and that helps you then think about ways that they might change in the future. On the basis of things that you've learned in the first and second year on modules such as quaternary environmental change, you might then in the third year choose to do a module that both has human and physical geography elements in it, called Adapting to Climate and Weather Hazards. In this module you really get to try and solve some of the current issues of the world and think about how humans might mitigate and adapt to their changing climate and weather. Our teaching laboratory is somewhere you might also come after you've finished one of our core or optional field modules. So you might have collected sediment in Tenerife on the core field course with myself in second year, for example, or from the Swiss Alps in the third year on our optional third year field course, or even from Cambodia on the optional third year field course there. You might bring some of that sediment back and want to analyse it in the laboratory, either in this teaching laboratory or the laboratory next door, the environmental processes laboratory. Here in our experimental annex, as part of the environmental processes laboratory, you see some hands-on experiments that you get to experience as part of some of the optional modules that you can take in second and third year. So behind you see a dune in Namibia, and we've taken this field dune where I do a lot of research on deserts, and we've brought this Namibian dune back to Southampton. You'll get to undertake a number of experiments here if you do my desert landscape module in the third year, where we take these coastal Namibian dunes and we look at how different wind patterns make those dunes move different distances. If you choose the optional module about desert landscapes and you're looking at these avalanche processes, you'll get the chance to actually measure them in the laboratory in high resolution using something called a terrestrial laser scanner, which gives you sub-millimeter accuracy about the shape of the surface and how that surface changes through time. So in our desert landscapes module, for example, you'll look at characterizing how avalanches change on the side of a dune. But you'll also have the option to use this in another optional module that we run in the second year called Coastal Landscapes and Human Interactions. Now this module really does look at how humans have impacted the coastline and how they change and interact with the landscape around them. You can see an example of one of the laboratory exercises you'll get to do on this module, where you really try and understand the overwash patterns. You can see here in the picture behind me how they occur under different hurricane magnitudes, for example. And it's not just in the laboratory that you get to use this type of equipment. So if you choose to go on the optional field course in the third year to the Swiss Alps, to Arolla, then you might indeed want to know how fast the ice is melting. And on a day-to-day basis, you might use something like the laser scanner to characterize the ice surface, keep remeasuring it, and see how different coverings might change how fast that ice is melting. Here we are in the Environmental Processes Lab, which is a laboratory you may end up in doing your dissertation work. It's where we do a lot of our day-to-day research, and some of the equipment here you have access to also for analysing some samples you might collect as part of your dissertation. For example, our XRF machine that does elemental analysis. Here you can see Peter Morgan, our dedicated laboratory manager, who will help you with your samples if you end up doing something like this for your dissertation. As you saw next door in the teaching laboratory, in your second year you might look at some long-term environmental change. Here in the third year you might bring some of the sediment that you've collected from a site and look in more detail at the environmental and climate characteristics of that sediment collected a long time ago in the past, to look at what land use, environmental climate conditions might have been like in those times, using techniques such as magnetic susceptibility, loss of ignition, which will then be able to tell you about how things have changed and help you solve things going forward. So if you choose to do a dissertation that involves field and laboratory work, you might find yourself down in the Environmental Processes Lab wanting to know something about the grain size of your sediment samples. You might have done some grain size analysis using things like sieves. We have a sieve room here as well, but our particle size analyzer works a lot more accurately. It's using lasers to get you a very accurate distribution of really fine sediment. So you can see here the sediment goes into the system, it gets mixed with some water, and we get straight away real-time evidence of what the grain size is doing. And once we've analysed enough particles, we get a really good distribution. It's a really good way of comparing how different land uses have changed over time, for example. So here one of our research associates is looking at sediment samples that he's collected from Scotland and seeing how land use has changed on different islands in Scotland. We will support you throughout your whole dissertation journey. So a supervisor will be assigned to you and they will help you with your data collection in the field. You'll get instructions from the laboratory staff as to what to do with your samples when you get back to Southampton. And then you'll get data from the computer, the output. You'll have a supervisor to help you understand and interpret what's going on in your particular landscape, in your environmental project. So hopefully this has given you a bit more of an idea of the facilities we have here in geography at Southampton, and we look forward to welcoming you soon.